Hey everyone, Tony D with another hot take. This one is on, what subject hasn't been talked about? How about impeachment? My God, will this thing never end? Um, Smash like and subscribe. Thank you for smash liking and subscribing. And if you like politics like I do, you're gonna have to read Wokistan. Link in the description. Wokistan, a novel. There's lots of politics there. The big question, and this is kind of something we touch on in Wokistan, will there be a civil war? It's being bandied about again. Tim Pool was just talking about it on his channel. He seems to think that if a civil war happens, it can only come from the left. I disagree with that, respectfully, because I think it could happen from the Trump supporters simply because things, I don't think it's likely, but things could go very badly for the president just due to circumstance. I mean, he is older. He could, God forbid, drop dead from a heart attack. And depending on the circumstances of his natural demise, that could be construed as that he was assassinated. It depends on how it happens, but Trump supporters would be pretty devastated. I mean, I think the whole country would be, really. I think there would be, unfortunately, the Democrats would be unable to contain themselves with their sheer joy. And I honestly think they would handle that so poorly, it could incite, not the entire country, but certainly a large faction of some of the Trump supporters to really protest. And they are armed, because people on the right, they tend to have guns. People on the left do not, which is part of the reason I think their threats are kind of empty and hollow, and why they tend to be more threatening with their verbiage, because they are all talk for the most part, and so they will go further with what they say because they don't see that translating into actual action. It's assumed that nothing they do will actually be action. It's just words, which is a huge problem for them, because it is part of the reason I think a lot of people on the left have lost credibility, because they don't follow through on their actions. Their actions speak for themselves. And so in terms of the civil war happening from the left, I honestly don't think that's going to happen either. I think in order for a violent revolution to happen, something incredibly big has to happen. Something so huge that it strikes asunder the people of this country. In the case of the original Civil War, that was a different era in which people of that era were used to pretty much being on their own, and not having the government or any entity really tell them what to do. So when they were able to go a lot further in terms of their preparation for the war, if that makes any sense. So that's just not going to happen here. Life is too complicated. The society is too complicated. You're not going to get an entire state, right? So, what's the bluest state in the union? I guess California. California's falling to pieces anyway. You think they're going to create an armed insurrection in California? No. Now, you might get people there to vote for a bunch of crazy things, like seceding from the United States. I still say they should split up California into separate states as they proposed. It's a shame that didn't go through. But that's just not going to happen. There's no realistic way the left will accumulate enough power like an army. The right could if they were serious about taking over. But I think if there is an armed insurrection or a violent response from the right, I think that will mostly be from the extreme right, the alt right people, the people who are like way out there, the crazy militias out in the Midwest, and the Timothy McVeigh types, and their response will be short-lived, and only if they feel like their country's being taken over by a bunch of if Trump were to unfortunately drop dead and Pence took over, I think there would be a lot of griping from those circles. But ultimately, if Pence was president, I think they would most of them would calm down. If somehow Trump dies and then Pence is removed from office, then you could call that a coup and people wouldn't stand for it. But I don't think the Democrats have the will. I think the most they can do is what they've done, which is to put on a show. They have friends in media. They've always been able to manipulate a lot of the media. So this has been a show for you. The impeachment inquiry has been a show and an attempt to sway people. Don't vote for Donald Trump. Will it turn into action? I'm thinking now that they probably won't get the votes for impeachment. And now that Trump's daring them to impeach him, I think he's prepared to drag the Democrats through the mud during the impeachment trial in the Senate, which the Republicans will control. And in the end, they can end that at any time. So they'll have control of it. So they'll spend their time bringing forth witnesses because it is a trial, and they're going to dig into all kinds of things. And I don't think the Democrats can risk that at this point. I think they, as Sticks and Hammer says, I think there's too many down ballot Democrats that are in trouble. There's a guy in New Jersey even, and he has said no against impeachment. He doesn't like it, which signals to me that he's probably in a district in which impeachment's very unpopular. He probably narrowly won. It's probably more of a purple district here. And, we do have one or two red districts in New Jersey. I believe like Bergen County is pretty red, the rich areas. And, New Jersey has, to some extent, flopped back and forth with the Republican and Democrat governor, right? I mean, we just got out of a Republican governor. And one of the reasons we had Republicans come in is because Democrats for years had been so corrupt. We had one corrupt Democrat after another. And then finally people were just like, well, I'm not electing another Democrat anymore. It's kind of what is happening to the Democrats on a national scale at this point. Their entire deal is just crumbling beneath them. So I think there's a good chance that there are going to be Democrats behind the scenes going, no, you can't bring this up for a vote because I cannot vote for it. And the Democrats are apparently broke, and they don't even have the money to promise people a soft landing if they take it on the chin and lose their election. So I think there's a good chance Pelosi just says, okay, we're done with the inquiry. We're not taking a vote. Because that, I think, now is her best strategy. If she doesn't take the vote, then the Senate can't do the trial, and people can just keep talking about it. They could just move on to the next perceived Trump scandal and try to hammer him with that. At this point, I think they should just give up. I really do. At this point, cut your losses. Again, if you're a Democrat, you should be calling your reps and saying, listen, just stop. Just stop shooting yourself in the foot. At this point, if the Democrats just stop, they won't do any more damage. There's something to be said for not doing it, for not making it worse. You're gonna lose the presidency. You're likely to lose the House. Don't make it worse. This just, continuing this, I think they're going to lose the House by even more. I think you're going to force a lot of people, especially Republicans. Republicans are motivated to vote. They're very motivated to vote for Trump because of this what they see as persecution. At least if you stopped now, by the time the election rolls around, that urge to vote, to save Trump from the Democrats will have died down somewhat. And some Republicans won't show up and you won't get absolutely creamed. The Republicans are behind Trump 95%, which is legendary numbers. The Democrats are split. You're going to have your own problems the moment you pick either Biden, which is probably going to be Biden, or Bernie Sanders or Warren or whoever. It's going to split the party. You've got to deal with that. You've got to spend next year dealing with the split in your party and saying, listen, you got to come together and vote for Biden or we don't stand a chance of winning this. And you're going to have to try to convince a bunch of hardcore lefties who you should have dealt with 4 years ago. 4 years ago, you could have dealt with this problem. You could have said, listen, first off, you could have been fair with dealing with Bernie and allowed him a brokered convention or whatever you would have allowed him, just like Ron Paul should have gotten a chance in the Republican convention. This has already happened with the Republicans. Ron Paul should have been part of a brokered convention. He wouldn't have been the nominee, but they would have had to have done something. They would have had to have talked to his delegates and won them over. Instead, the Republicans just changed the rules and said, okay, Mitt Romney's the winner. That really drove people out of the Republican Party. Just drove them out in droves, especially up in Maine. They are up in the Northeast furious with Republicans from that election. That was 2012. Now the same thing's going to happen this election. So you can stave off the problems now by starting to work with Trump, at least in this last year. At least in the last year. You could say, well, we tried, we investigated him, we tried to impeach him. Just back off. And you got to tell your friends in media to back off too, because they're destroying themselves as well. This all goes into my bigger, wider theory, which I have zero evidence for. Some. That Operation Mockingbird never stopped, and that a lot of this is coming from the deep state, CIA, whatever you want to call it, that they don't like Trump, they don't like his demeanor, and that he'll stop all these wars because the CIA is involved with all these drone strikes and doing all kinds of stuff. They don't want the gravy train to stop. Whatever they're doing, they don't want it to stop. I don't know what they're doing. They're doing a lot. They've got billions of dollars at stake. They don't want any of that to stop. They only want that number to go up. They only want their budget to go up, never to go down. Same thing with the Pentagon. And that's all tied in together with the defense industry and the military industrial complex. It's all these players, and they're all just getting tons and tons of money. Nobody wants that gravy train to stop. Trump threatens that. He threatens that merely by the fact that, for instance, if he gets a peace between North and South Korea, you're going to have lost a major customer in terms of South Korea. They're just not going to buy any weapons if they've got peace with North Korea. They're not going to need them. Not like before. They'll need some weapons, but they're not going to need it. They were about to sell them billions of dollars of missile systems to hopefully help against the North's cannons that are aimed to the South. They're not going to, they turn that down. They're not going to buy it. They don't need it. So we need to just say, look, we got to find other customers. And Trump is finding other customers. He found the Saudis and he's selling them a ton of weapons. I think that's part of his strategy. It's like, well, if you got to sell weapons, sell them to specific people. Don't just try to. The object of the game is to have peace, not to just sell everybody weapons. So I think Trump is at least trying to ease the defense industry back slowly But I think they're fighting them tooth and nail, and they're doing that through their contacts in the Pentagon and in the deep state, because all those guys eventually retire, or they flop back and forth between, defense industry people, the deep state, and the Pentagon. I mean, once you're in that world, you can go anywhere, right? If you have a security clearance, that's valuable. It's valuable in terms of your job. If you can, if you can work in the defense industry and you can see classified stuff, you're a value to private companies and selling these weapon systems, whether it's to, the United States or a foreign country. So it's really all about money. It's not a grand conspiracy theory. It makes total sense. It's just about money. And we have to tell these people, listen, you can't make as much money as you used to, because ultimately this is costing us money. It's costing us so much money, and you're endangering the entire country by eating up all these resources and wealth, that we could better serve ourselves, including those defense industries. When World War II ended, Eisenhower cut the military budget in half, and we had this humongous surge of wealth and prosperity that has never been seen in human history since or before. That's why everybody had jobs, everybody was in a union, not everybody, but a lot of people were in unions, they had benefits. That's, a lot of our government workers they still have all that. It's left over from that time period. We were building public schools and highways and had all this great infrastructure, and people wonder what happened to that all. What happened was we stopped making that money because we started pouring it back slowly, starting with Vietnam. Well, really starting with Korea, we started pouring it back into the military-industrial complex, and slowly it's grown over all these years, and now it's just out of control. So if Democrats could just stop seeing the tiny picture of their own, they could take what Trump has done and add to it, just like an improv. Yes, and they could say, yes, Trump did this, but we're going to go even further. And if they did that, people would respond. But right now they're not, and right now they're just shooting themselves in the foot. And I think what you're going to see ultimately is the Dems pull back. They'll get their clocks cleaned, just like they did back in the Bush era. The Republicans will have another 4 years of Trump. Then they will have probably at least another 4 years of Pence. Pence will go too far, and he'll limp to a re-election, and then maybe at the end of Pence's second term, it'll be so bad that finally some Democrats will come forward that makes sense, and that people will go, God, we gotta get these Republicans out. But that's way down the road. So impeachment, nothing has happened. It shouldn't happen. We should just end it and move on with our lives. And also, people in the news industry, you got to stop listening to your government contacts. You really do. You really have to start questioning them. It may be biting the hand that feeds you, but ultimately, your credibility is your bread and butter, and you have very little of it. And, I wrote a funny article about CNN having to share its studio space with a fried chicken franchise that they were so poor that they were going to have to cook chicken and report the news at the same time. The rate things are going, that's not too far off. You guys are going to be in big trouble. Your big salaries are going away. Your wonderful perks are going away unless you regain your credibility. And the only way to do that is to report actual news and to challenge authority, not constantly shill for it. And it doesn't matter if that authority is Donald Trump or the Democrats. It's anyone in authority. You have to be your own thing. You have to be independent of that. So anyhow, that's my rant. I will see you next time.